available that people can find for themselves. But the reality is that everywhere where this process is unleashed beneath a community, it results in the contamination of the water, of the soil, and ultimately of the air. And in places like Colorado, in New Mexico, and more recently in Pennsylvania, and also in Queensland, in Australia, the communities there are suffering horrendously, not just from the contamination, but also from the loss of water. One of the issues, the big issues for me in this country, is that in the US, water is being taken from the Great Lakes and from the Great River systems. In the far west, many communities in Texas are currently trying to get the gas companies to stop fracking because it's sucking their aquifers dry, and West Texas is in drought right now. In Australia, they're taking the water from the Great Artesian Basin. And if this shale gas industry kicks off in this country, it will need about, and this is a conservative estimate, 100 million gallons per square mile. And, we don't have Great Lakes. We don't have a great river system. So where is this water coming from? And this is a question that isn't being asked by the mainstream media and certainly isn't being addressed by the British government.
Okay, I'm no expert on this. I'm just going by what I hear and who I talk to. Here's Len in Crayford, who says there are 500,000 shale gas wells in the United States. I'm sure that if it were dangerous, it would have been proved by now.
Well, listen, in the US, the oil and gas industry is actually exempt from having to acknowledge or report any contamination of water, soil, or atmosphere. And this can be traced, and I would encourage your listeners to Google Halliburton loophole, because this is the collective term for the legislation that Dick Cheney, when he was vice president, and of course he's the former chief executive officer of Halliburton, but this is the legislation that Dick Cheney forced through the Senate in 2005, which exempts the oil and gas industry from having to acknowledge or do anything about any contamination they cause.
Do you have any direct, incontrovertible evidence that people have been poisoned and contaminated by this process?
What I would encourage people to do is to watch the film Split Estate. Many people have heard of the film Gasland.
Do you think that... hold on, let me just find out from you. Do you think that Gasland has been discredited?
I think Josh Fox, the director of Gasland, I think he acknowledged that he'd perhaps been he'd erred on the side of sensationalism, which is why he's made Gasland 2, which focuses much more on the science.
Yeah, but that's got the hose which he sets alight when the water comes out, and that's been discredited.
I toured this country earlier this year. I did 63 presentations around the country, and I showed footage that was taken from Queensland in November last year, where I show a Queensland farmer where he's had to effectively rig up a device to burn off the methane that is in his water. And I would ask people to search for something called List of the Harm. The List of the Harm is a list that's been collated of all the people that have suffered from the negative health effects because of the gas industry. And of course, in the mainstream media recently, we saw in the Daily Telegraph reported that a gagging order had been lifted from a family in Pennsylvania who'd been paid $750,000 to keep quiet about the negative health effects that they have suffered as a direct result of living over a gas field.
Right, and are you saying that this is just because of fracking, or is this because of the gas industry generally?
No, well, listen, there are always issues with hydrocarbons, there's no question about that. But the only thing that's proven about fracking is that it doesn't work as the oil industry claims it does.
Why not?
Well, because basically once you're pumping literally millions of gallons of water, and of which 5% or so will be toxic additives, once you're pumping this down at 7,500, 8,500 pounds per square inch, you actually have no control over what's going to happen. No petroleum engineer, no geologist, and certainly no chemist can accurately predict exactly what's going to happen when this stuff is pumped.
Why would the Prime Minister go on the record and say he approves of this process if he's in any doubt whatsoever?
So I think we know categorically that David Cameron has lied. I mean, there's no doubt about that whatsoever.
What do you mean?
Either that or he's living in a world of cognitive dissonance, because he made that announcement about there's never been a case where there's been concern about the contamination of water, and yet we know that the Water Authority in Sussex wrote to the Environment Agency over a year ago, having done their own research and expressed concerns about the risk of contamination to Sussex water supply. And the reality is, if there is any, and I mean any, concern whatsoever over the likely contamination of water, then obviously it's not something that we should be embracing.
Okay, without
water, we have no life.
Right. Well, without trying to send the whole nation into a panic, what actually happens to somebody who drinks this contaminated water? Or what happens to someone who's infected, if I can use that word, by this process?
Okay, what we see, and this is, again, I would encourage people to look at the film Split Estate, or to look at the work of Dr. Theo Colborn, who's regarded as one of the world's leading specialists in endocrine-disrupting chemicals in the environment. And one of the long-term effects of living in a methane-contaminated environment is people going into early dementia. And because methane is an odorless gas, I mean, you don't realize the impact that it's having on a day-to-day basis, but it creeps up on you and, will have pretty serious effects over the long term. So, and once again, like I say, don't take my word for it. I would absolutely encourage people to look at this for themselves. It's essential that people come to their own realization of what this process could eventually mean to people living in 64% of England.
Did you come by this philosophy, beliefs, whatever you'd like to call it, while you were working in the field as an oil field executive?
No, I left the oil industry in 1998, and I had a number of reasons for leaving the oil industry, one of which was my concern about the total lack of transparency over the chemical cocktail that's added to the frack fluid. And, whilst I was in the United States, working in the United States, I unfortunately had the task of attending 3 funerals while I was there. And, with the benefit of hindsight, I can't prove it, of course, but, these were young men, and they all had the same job. They were all pump truck operators in frack crews. And, these guys were exposed to this stuff on a day-to-day basis. And we're talking stuff here that is carcinogenic, it's known carcinogenics. Thanks to the work of Dr. Theo Colborn, we have the list of 900-plus chemicals that are used by the U.S. oil and gas industry. And, of course, the oil and gas industry in this country wants to use the same type of practice where it wants to self-regulate, which is, of course, completely unacceptable.
Okay, I said that you were sort of on the front line. Are you actually, whereabouts are you? Are you actually sort of on the line right now?
Right now I'm in the village of Balcombe. I'm just about a mile away from the front line.
Okay, have you been near arrest?
Say again?
Have you been nearly arrested or got anywhere close? What have you done?
No, not at all. And, some of the hype that's being put out in the media about people being arrested is really outrageous.
Okay, what's the truth?
It's a carnival atmosphere, and the vast majority of people down here are people that represent the entire cross-section of British society. I mean, I've spoken to people from every political persuasion. I've spoken with people from probably every religious and spiritual persuasion. The one thing that unites the people here is that they have done their research and they are very, very concerned about an agenda that is putting the nation's water supply.
Well, we've been reporting, maybe erroneously, but I don't think so, that a Green MP has been arrested. Is that not true?
Say again? Sorry, I lost you there.
We've been reporting that a Green MP has been arrested, which we believe, obviously, to be true. I mean, that's happened, hasn't it?
That's true. These are people who are part of Reclaim Your Power, which is a completely separate entity. And they arrived a few days ago, and they did advise the police that they were planning some direct action.
Okay.
But that's not. I don't think that's not connected with the people that are camping outside the entrance to Quadrilla site at Balcombe.
Ian, thank you very much for coming on. So there you are. That's the opposing view. It's very difficult to find any sort of common ground in there. What do you think of what you've heard? You've heard from a professor of geology who said there's no real danger in it. You've heard from someone who was in the oil industry and a researcher of geopolitics, and he feels that actually we're not being told the truth. Where is the truth in all this, or will we never know? 0845 6060 973. And what about the damage to the village of Balcombe that's being made by the protesters? Do you have any thoughts on that particular subject? 0845 6060 973 is the number to ring. If you want to text 84850, and if you want to tweet, it's at LBC 973. It's 6:30.